Listen.
Listen here. Listen.
You are not defeated with your host, David Hernandez.
What's up, my people? So good to be here with you all. I have an awesome episode set up for you today. We're talking about motivation. I invited an awesome friend, special guest. This is a part one of a two-part series. You don't want to miss it. Crushing everything on motivation, helping you how to get to that place and stay there and not have to worry about it. Check it out. All right, so I'm really excited about today's guest that we have. I've been a fan of his for a bit now, since I started connecting with him and just learning from him. So today we have Dr. Nick Holton. He works as a consultant, as a coach, as a speaker and author who focuses on scientific research that facilitates the purpose of optimal functioning and synergistic development, both in the performance and overall meaning of satisfaction. So he's had the privilege of working with the NBA, various NCAA athletic programs, including the national champion program back in 2019. And he works both with national and international businesses. And this guy's got an intense background when it comes to experience in group training, publishing works, keynote speaking on various psychological topics, both here in the US, in Europe, Mexico, and India. And this is impressive. He's founded one of the first ever positive psychology education programs in California, and is currently reviews manuscripts for the Journal of Happiness Studies. And he also now serves as the Associate Director of Positive Education at Skippy Schools, the American leader in education for flourishing, who focuses on adult training and satisfaction. So please help me welcome Dr. Nick Holton. What's up, man?
Hey, buddy. Thanks for that. I got to throw in real quick. It's Shipley School, the Shipley School.
Shipley.
Yeah. Shipley.
My apologies.
All good. Our marketing crew would be all over at me if I didn't say something. So
good point. The Shipley schools, man, dude. So good we were able to hook this up and get this going, man. We've been talking about this for a couple months, and just happy to have you here, man.
I'm excited to be here, man. I'm happy for you for the work you're doing, and I'm happy for the people, you know, whose lives you're going to touch, and I'm happy to try and help out if I can. We'll see.
Absolutely. Look, so we met back about a year ago, and you know, through my acting training and acting school, I was able to have, you know, take some courses and trainings with you. And look, not gonna lie, I was very skeptical as to what was gonna go on in that class, because I had absolutely nothing, no information about it. There was Thrive in there and Flow. I was like, what is this all about, right? And I went in there, met you for the first time. You were bald, just like me. I said, all right, we're on the right track. We got something.
Mine by choice, man. Mine by choice.
Yours by choice, not mine, right? Sadly. But no, I must say, man, every class there that we had, just every training was just like wisdom and knowledge upon knowledge, and got me to the point of really reanalyzing, even like, dude, how have I been surviving without this information today? Like literally, how have I been performing at the place where I'm performing without having this understanding of what flow is, right? And the cognitive and the things about our mind, which we'll be able to explain that better as we go on. But it's just incredible, man. So I have to just say, your work is phenomenal. It's impacted my life. You're the reason why I'm waking up at 4:30 now, making sure I'm in performance, dude. So that shout outs to you on that. It's a big difference.
Let's quickly establish for your listeners, I'm not going to sit here and try and convince everyone to wake up at 4:30. So,
please don't.
Yeah.
They're probably going to tune out, dude.
Yeah. Stick with us. But yeah, I mean, like you said the word surviving, right? And I think the difference we try to establish right away is the difference between surviving and thriving, right? Those are not the same things. So, yeah. So I mean,
look, give us a little bit of background. How did you get involved into this? This is, you know, you have a PhD, and this obviously took a lot of work, right? And how did this passion come out? Where did it evolve from? How'd you get started into what you're currently doing now?
Yeah, I mean, so the story that I tend to share with people is I can really trace back to all the way to when I was a kid, 6th grade. Grew up in Michigan, West Michigan. Got a couple of sisters, and took one of them out into the driveway when she was in 2nd grade. I was a pretty good soccer player. That's where some of that coaching background comes in. You mentioned I
Nice.
worked with some college, soccer teams.
Yeah.
And showed her a few things, tried to help her out a little bit. And she went out later that day, had a great game, scored a couple of goals. And, 6th grade, 12-year-old me looked at that and was like, oh, I did that. I
Dude.
caused that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, like, that's not the case, or
Right.
probably not the case, but it didn't
Some
really
influence,
matter.
I'm assuming. Some influence, maybe.
Maybe hopefully she felt a little more confident because of it. But either way, the takeaway for me was, oh, it felt really good to at least perceive that, I could help somebody else level up. Right.
Nice.
And that they would become happier because of that leveling up.
Got
Right.
it.
And so, time goes on. I'm basically thinking, oh, how do I get more of that? By 9th grade, I had an opportunity to do a job shadow with a badass uncle of mine, also in West Michigan, who's an athletic director. He was an athletic director at the time. He's an assistant principal now.
Okay.
And, I had lots and lots of awesome teachers. I went on the job shadow with him, saw that he had the same sort of relationships, but, I got to see it from his side, right? From that perspective.
Right.
And it was like, oh, that's that same feeling, right?
Mm.
So I want to go into education. So by 9th grade, it was like, okay, I want to teach. Went to undergrad, chose what to teach, got a bachelor's degree in history, taught history for a decade. It was not it was not that same feeling.
Right.
So went back, got a master's degree, thought that might give me some answers. It did not. Finally went back, got my PhD, and I started studying what eventually I would come to know as intrinsic motivation, which we'll talk a little bit about, tonight.
Yeah.
And that sort of opened me up to the concept of flow, this sort of psychological state where we feel our best and perform our best.
Right.
And that really is what I was after. And then that sort of turned into like a deep dive into the world of positive psychology, neuroscience, organizational psychology, evolutionary psychology.
Wow.
And, before I knew it, it was really sort of, teaching courses in that, doing a lot of reading, writing, speaking around that. And, now joining esteemed gentlemen like yourself on podcasts.
Bro, that's amazing. That's awesome, man. And it's funny how a lot of our experiences are related to an experience that we had when we were young, right? Whether it's good or bad. Yeah. And I think having that awareness to be able to recognize at when that happened and what that feeling was, and being able to still, as you're going through the years and in your studies, being able to identify that's not the feeling, and still being after that feeling. And when you finally get it, that sense of satisfaction, that's incredible, man.
Like you might remember a little bit from class, we talk a bit about Richard Wiseman's work, the traits of lucky people.
Right.
Traits of lucky people. And the third trait, my personal favorite, is that they trust their gut. They follow their intuition. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to, the sense of like authenticity, the sense of alignment, right? Tapping into those sort of things.
Yeah.
Which, not everybody is fortunate enough to be exposed to or necessarily has the ability, I think, to listen to. So I feel very fortunate, quote unquote lucky, if you will, right? That things worked out the way they were. It wasn't this sort of like, you see, like, we're both athletes. You see a lot of stuff from, the world of athletics where it's the like, oh, the second I picked up a football, the second I picked up a basketball, the second I swung a golf club, I knew right? That's
Right,
what
right.
they're
That
gonna do.
instant satisfaction that's like so gratifying. Yeah.
Yeah, and like they're like, oh, that's how what I want to spend my life doing, and that's not what happened to me in sixth grade, right? Like those are
Right.
beautiful stories, but mine was not, quite as didn't have quite the clear guardrails that those sort of experiences do. So mine tend to be like most experiences of cultivating passion, which is that we develop it over the course of time. It doesn't happen in a single instant, and over that course of time you try to just keep listening, I think, to that intuition, that inner voice.
Dude, but I think that's powerful because there's so many people, and look, I have the privilege of talking to, men and women that are all in all walks of life and looking to just become better humans, become the best version of themselves, specifically in the health and fitness industry, but not primarily only in that area. But what I hear here is just like even your determination of still putting in the work to go after it. I have experiences to where it's even happened to myself to where I give up, right? It's like I have that desire of a certain sensation, a certain feeling, or something that I'm after. But a lot of times as humans, we might want to give up and just like say, oh, maybe it's not for me, or we allow other things, external factors within ourselves to like not allow us to get to that place. Just the fact that you were persistent in that drive to get that and to find it, right?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I think that's a lot of what, we'll be talking about in this episode. Ultimately, like the motivation or the why,
Right.
because, it's nice of you to say that. And I can't honestly sit here and say that I'm like persistent in all parts of my life, right? Or that
Right.
I necessarily be highly motivated in all parts of my life. This is one area of my life where I am highly motivated. And part of that is because it's become a passion. But ultimately, I think a lot of that, if I look back on it now, really came down to the why behind it all.
Got it.
And for me specifically, that was being in education and feeling like I was looking around a lot of classrooms and basically feeling like, man, this sucks.
Mm.
Like they're not digging it. I'm not really feeling great about like what I'm creating for them. Sometimes that's my fault. Sometimes that's because the content is just
Yep.
not as
Yep.
relevant as some other things might be.
Right.
There's no choice. Like they're forced to be in many of those situations,
Yeah.
which I think goes against a lot of our biology.
Right.
And the system's sort of set up that way. So, when I went back for my master's and then eventually my doctorate, a lot of it was not necessarily like, oh, I also want this really good feeling that I had from like sixth grade. Some of it was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Wow.
And this education, teaching, helping people level up is a really, really big deal. I think can be transformative,
Yeah.
in terms of, communities and states, countries, like
100%.
humanity as a whole. So for me, that was very, that allowed me a certain, I guess, sense of transcendence,
Yeah.
right? Something that felt more important than just me and my own sort of like carnal or hedonistic desires. Like, well,
Right. Right.
I could be sitting on the couch and, you know, down in some Ben and Jerry's and like binging whatever show on Netflix right now. But, if I can just get through these few more pages, like there might be something in this book that benefits these people I'm going to talk to tomorrow or
Sure.
teach, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
So like, and granted, I love Ben and Jerry's and I love
Yeah.
Netflix like
You're still,
anybody, but
you're not perfect. You're still, you're still
right. But that why is ultimately, I think, why we're here tonight, is to
yeah.
help people think about how to tap into some of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And look, I think that's why one of the things why I kind of came so passionate about what you did was because I think have that similarity in the sense of why we do what we do, in the sense of there's that why factor of understanding that it's bigger than us, right? I always talk about this, even with me, is what we do or what I do, what us as coaches do, it's bigger than us because there is a life that's there that needs to be impacted, that we have the opportunity to impact in a way that maybe nobody ever has, to be able to get them to a better state of being. And I totally relate with that why. And having that in the forefront when I took those, even the classes with you, is what really brought me to hone down to the clarity of what is my why,
right? Like, why am I doing it? What's so powerful about that, Nick? I mean, what's really the benefits of having that clarity of that why?
Well, I mean, I'll give you sort of like the sciencey version, and then sort of like just I think sort of the plain speak version. The sciencey version is, what we're talking about here, this why. I mean, ultimately, why is motivation, right? Why do I do anything? What is the basic foundation of my, daily behaviors?
So would you say the basis of it starts with that? The foundation for
and that's essentially what motivation is, right?
Okay.
Why do I take this action, right? Perfect. Why do I go get food? I'm hungry. I need to survive, right?
Makes sense, right?
What's a bit more interesting is like when you get beyond some of those core needs, right? Why do I grab water? I have to drink. Why do I grab food? I have to eat. Why do I lay down? I have to sleep, right? Those things are physiological. When you go beyond those, I think we misconstrue motivation quite a bit, especially here in the States. Like culturally speaking, we have some misconceptions about what's going to lead to happiness, what's going to be satisfying. And so we tend to chase a lot of what you would call extrinsic motivators. Okay. These are things that we would do to either gain an award or avoid a punishment. Okay. So they are contingent-based behaviors, right?
Dude, that's so true.
Absolutely, right. And
when I was a young kid, like doing sports, it's like I want to do this so I can get that first place trophy, or so that I can get that pat in the back from that coach, right? Totally relatable.
Right. Yeah. Winning is another example, right? So the difference there is, what we're talking about, this big why, this sort of purpose-driven why, is really a component of what's called intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is when we do something essentially for internal or inherent rewards.
Okay.
So rather than, you were a football player, right? So you play football and you hope you win. You hope you win your game. You hope you knock the snot out of some dude and you score a touchdown, whatever it might be. But if we're intrinsically motivated to do it, then what that means is win or lose, we play because we enjoy playing the game. The experience itself is inherently satisfying.
Got it. It's enough.
Right, exactly. So in athletic terms, this is Kobe, this is Jordan, this is LeBron, this is Tiger. Like, don't get me wrong, they're all hyper competitive and wanted to win, but they all enjoyed the process of getting better, right? The actual experience of playing is what brought a lot of this satisfaction. So these components of intrinsic motivation, there are typically three, and we've been talking about one of those. One of those is purpose.
Okay.
Right? So purpose or relatedness is basically it's the sense of how we as unique individuals can make an impact on or can contribute to something that is bigger or more significant than us as individuals.
Got it.
Right? So why do parents all over the world like go to these incredible ends and accomplish these amazing feats? Well, they deeply care about and want to take care of their family, right? They say, well, I as a unique individual can do this, have this job, perform this act, drive my kids to, soccer practice and play practice and all this sort of stuff, these incredible things. And that is very purposeful because my family is more significant than me as an individual.
Right.
Why do I get up at 4:30 and write each morning and do these other things and read and take multiple jobs, all that sort of stuff? It's not because I necessarily enjoy quote unquote grinding, right? It's because I believe that there's something that can be contributed. And I hope, right, that I have something to contribute. So this is purpose, right?
Got it.
The other two components are autonomy. So, I mentioned already with school, right? By the way, this is, part of the problem, I think, why I went for the doctorate with education is it's not always very good at inspiring purpose. And it's certainly not great at, harnessing autonomy. So autonomy is our sense of self-directedness. Are we choosing what we want to do, when we want to do it, how we want to do it, with whom we want to do it, right? Simple idea. Who likes to be controlled? Nobody that I know.
Nobody.
Right? Nobody
we
that
want that power, dude. We want to be in that.
Yeah, right. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place to like follow versus lead and like take guidance and listen to advice and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, most of us want to have some sense of control or choice over what we're doing. And so that's another component of intrinsic motivation, right? You chose football, presumably, right? I eventually chose soccer. I played a lot of different sports. I think as a kid, my dad probably would have preferred that I played football because that's what he played.
Yeah.
But to his credit, once I was like, nah, that's not for me. This game literally never starts. No offense to you. It's like every
I'm gonna try not to take it personal.
But like every 30 seconds, this game is stopping. And then I went and played soccer for the first time. I was like, oh, this game never stops. At least as in the child version, right? When you have guys rolling around on the ground.
Yeah.
So autonomy and purpose are two of the components. The third is competence or mastery. So, most of us like to feel that we're good at something, that we have certain skills. And so we will actively work to develop those skills. And the simple way to think of this is hobbies, right? People who paint, people who do woodworking, people who learn instruments, right? They're not doing it necessarily because they're going to make money. There's not necessarily utility value to these things. They do it because it feels good to build competencies and because they've chosen to do it and they find it interesting. And if they get the real sweet spot, it's when they say, okay, I've autonomously chosen to learn to play the piano. And now I'm going to go down to my grandpa's, senior home and play for him on Fridays, like students I've had in the past, right? That's where you're starting to get this sweet spot. And now you really got the motivational ball rolling. Got
it.
So that's like kind of the long version of it. But ultimately, like the plain language is it's meaning. It's like, why are we here? Right. Well, most of us, I think, want to feel like we're here to contribute something.
Right.
And I think the purpose piece really speaks to that. What are the skills we have to contribute? What is the thing or things we want to contribute those skills to?
Simply said, and so impactful, dude. So powerful with that. And I think it couldn't be expressed so simply to be able to identify, because I think when we think of what we want to do, or when we think of like purpose and we think of passion, we make it so much complicated than it really is. And a lot of people even say, well, I don't have a why, right? I don't know why I'm doing this, or there isn't really what they can identify to be that purpose that drives them to do it. But I think, would you agree, everyone has, if not can, identify what that is?
I'm always hesitant to say everyone, always, never, like words like that. I think that is probably the case. I think in fairness, just knowing, being somewhat familiar with a bit of the science is like, I think people who, so listen, there's a clear correlation between a lack of meaning in life, right? And low levels of life satisfaction, right? Low levels of happiness, low levels of well-being, things of that nature. Meaning is a huge predictor of those sort of things. And there are plenty of people out there who absolutely see a lack of meaning. And another way of saying that is they can't see a why, right? And this is essentially oftentimes what depression is, right? Like, why would I bother doing this? Why should I get up today? Why should I get out of bed? And they don't necessarily have answers to that, right? And there could be a variety of reasons for that.
Okay.
Can most people, come out of that? Most is probably a fair word, but lots of people are dealing with lots of different things, neurochemical, imbalances and different changes and things of that nature. And so I don't want to disrespect or minimalize, marginalize anyone that's dealing with those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think the point we're making is it's worth trying to think about and put in the effort to find that why.
Okay.
Right? If at all possible. And you remember from class a little bit, and I was just teaching this to a group of people this morning, is when you think about your why, and if people listening are saying, I don't know what my why is, I don't know what my purpose is, well, that's okay. Like, we've got time. What we want to think about is like, let's make sure we're trying to understand what that why is. We're taking conscious and thoughtful action to maybe tap into that purpose. And what we would always say in class is, if we take the opinion, if we take the mindset that there is nothing we can do to find our why, if there's nothing we can do to, cultivate that sense of meaning and that sense of purpose.
Okay.
In other words, if we're pessimistic about it, right?
Right.
That dooms us to failure.
Mm.
Right? We've written our own script at that point. Okay?
Yeah.
If we are so pessimistic that we don't even bother trying, then we have essentially told ourselves that we are helpless. Right? And there's nothing we're going to do. And then that's going to become its own sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. If we're optimistic about it, which I think your question speaks to, can everybody do this, right? If we're optimistic about it, well, at least we're going to give it a go.
There you go.
At least we're going to take a shot, right? And that just, simple math, like, increases the likelihood that these things can actually happen, right? But we have to give it a go. And in that way, it starts with beliefs, attitudes, mindsets.
What would you say, or what advice would you give to those that are in that place where they're saying, well, I just can't seem to find it. I just can't, like, I've tried this, I've tried that. I just can't seem to grasp that really has full meaning to me, to really know if what I'm doing is what I want to do, or if what I'm doing is what I should be doing. What advice would you give as that type of person?
I mean, and again, not everyone, like you and I are very privileged to like have these sorts of things in our lives. And by things, what I mean is like people and or values or things like we would take bullets for.
Right. Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be something that you would necessarily take a bullet for, but that's like a simple way of thinking about it, right? What is bigger, more significant, or more important than myself? Oh, this person, this relationship, this system, or this sort of like core value. That's something that I sort of put out to people like pretty frequently. It's a little complex because when you get into the weeds a little bit, it's not like with things that are intrinsically motivating, you autonomously choose something, then develop competence, then get purpose. They can sort of like come together in less linear fashion and more of kind of a web, right?
Okay.
So
they can come from different.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in some ways, like those folks out there would argue that sometimes it comes from your interests first, right? So another piece of advice would be like, what are you curious about, right? What are you interested in? And then starting to kind of play with those and tinker with those. And, I was working with a client a couple weeks ago. He's interested in light therapy and he wants to do book reviews and start his own podcast. And a variety of other like pretty interesting topics, right? And he's got this whole list, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, let's start like pursuing those, right?
Right.
And that is his autonomous choice, and are things he wants to develop competency in, right?
Right.
Does he know what he wants to contribute those things to yet? I'm not so sure. Maybe a general sense of humanity, right? Like that's fine. But I don't think his sense of purpose is as clearly defined as his sense of what he's interested in, right? So he's sort of starting with the competency piece first. And so that's another thing. Like, okay, yeah, like what would you take a bullet for? What do you care about? Who do you love? What do you love? And that's what I meant about privilege earlier. Like you and I are fortunate enough to have people in our lives that give us that sense of meaning, right? And that sense of love and these values and beliefs. For those that don't, maybe start with the competencies, like what just kind of makes you feel good to pursue and learn and develop and grow in, right? And do more of that and see where that takes you, right? And the purpose part may come a little later.
Right. Would you say action has a lot to do with that? Taking action towards that, as opposed to waiting to see if it comes to me and if I enjoy to do it, then I'll do it. Would you say the exploring process will also be able to bring that development to be able to identify that?
100%. So, in terms of like the neurochemicals, when we're exploring, when we're trying out new things, what we're getting is releases of the neurotransmitter dopamine. And dopamine is basically like the kind of seek out chemical. So, you and I are cave people thousands of years ago. Something new comes into our environment, something novel comes into our environment. Dopamine is the neurochemical that says, hey, Nick, hey, David, pay attention to that. Go figure out what it is, see if it's a threat or if you can go back into your rest and digest state, right?
Got it.
So that's kind of a long way of saying, like, we like newness, we like novelty, we like exploration, we like being able to detect patterns, we like being able to learn new things and novel skills. And
is that why we like gossip so much?
That's probably somewhat for a different reason, but yeah, to your question, right? Like that's what exploration is. Exploration is literally going out and seeing things that are almost entirely new or exclusively new, and getting those sort of like consistent shots of dopamine. And so, yeah, like that speaks to the competency piece as well, right? Go out, explore, try to find things that you're interested in, and just sort of like naturally, intrinsically fueled to do it. It's going to be, and by the way, the external world might say like it should be this thing or that thing or the other thing.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. This is where like the authenticity piece has to come in. Like it's going to be different for you than it probably is for everybody around you, right? Like,
right. It's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, and I'm thinking right now of my, let's say 9 or 10 like closest friends. Okay, my 9 or 10 closest guy friends specifically.
Okay.
So let's just call it my 10 closest friends, right? We're talking one PhD in chemistry and works on cancer treatments, one PhD engineering, other 2 engineers, one's an accountant, one's an entrepreneur, one's a college soccer coach, the other one works in the cannabis industry, like totally and completely different interests, right?
Yeah.
All wonderful people, all highly motivated by what they do, I think incredibly satisfied by what they do, and not a single one of us has the same stuff, right? Even though we're that close. And, like, it's okay to like what you like.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
And then just kind of trust it and follow it a little bit. But what I would say is, also don't take that too far and be closed off to what other people might bring into the fray, right? So like a lot of us have probably had experiences, especially as kids, where maybe like somebody forced us to do something.
Right.
Even though we didn't want to do it, we eventually liked it.
Yeah.
Eventually it did become autonomous. It did become internalized. It's like, okay, I'll keep doing this, right?
Yeah.
I'm into this now. And so it's great to autonomously choose and to go out and to seek and explore. But sometimes those good things do just sort of come to us, right? I think like what I want to disrupt is this whole like, oh, there's just this like kind of cosmic destiny where all the things I need will just come to me. And like that, no, that's not the way it works.
I agree.
We don't just sort of like manifest things. Like you got to go get them a little bit.
There you go. Yes. Right? Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things I also talk about it with my clients, right? They all want to be the best version of themselves. They want to perform at their optimal every time in regards to their health and their fitness. And some may want to lose weight. Others might want to build muscle, but a lot of them just think that it's going to come to them as opposed to taking action to be able to obtain or to achieve or to get to the place where they want to get to, right? So I totally agree with that. Now, what would you say in terms of meaning, going back to that, right? A person that is in process, you hit a word that I absolutely love and that I talk about on a daily basis as well in my business and with my clients, about embracing the process and falling in love with the process and finding the meaning to it. But what then happens to somebody that is in process but begins to self-sabotage themselves in the sense because they're looking for a certain result, but maybe they're not getting it, and they feel that what they're doing isn't for them or it's just not obtainable, right?
I mean, there's a lot of layers to what you just mentioned. Like, so not attainable is one thing, right?
Okay.
There's some implications on self-efficacy or their confidence in their own ability. There's some implications on maybe sort of like their sense of optimism versus pessimism, explanatory style, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of the process itself, it's helpful to go back to this notion of competency or mastery, and mention what Dan Pink talks about in his book Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And he has this great analogy that mastery is asymptotic. It's an asymptote, which is a mathematical term for a curved line that approaches a straight line but can go on for infinity, to infinity, and never actually make contact with that straight line. Right. Okay. So it's, podcasts hard to visualize that. What does that mean? Mastery is not a destination. It is an ongoing process. We can never achieve mastery. Tiger Woods wins the Masters the first time, completely redoes his swing. Right. He redid his swing at least 3 or 4 times throughout his entire career, probably more than that, especially once he started having back trouble. Right. Yeah. Michael Jordan wins all these titles, MVPs, stuff like that, starts working on his fadeaway jump shot, right? LeBron starts working on his post game. Obviously, I use a lot of sports analogies, right?
Of course, you're a coach, you're a sports
right.
athlete, man. Bring it on.
But, like the idea here is like, so when we talk about flow, what you ultimately want is sort of that mindset or that attitude to just sort of like keep climbing the next hill and keep finding the next win. Why? The next win brings some of that dopamine that we talked about earlier, right?
Right.
What's difficult for people is a lot of times their focus is only on the big win, right?
Yes,
in this final outcome. So here's the kind of paradox that actually should help arm some of these people with a little bit more sustainable motivation. If we view things as, sort of a destination instead of an ongoing process, right? Well, here's the problem with that. When you get to your destination, what happens?
Then what?
Yeah, then what, right? Well, what happens is what's called hedonic adaptation. So we get to that destination. We feel good about getting that destination. This is why goals are a great thing to have, okay? But we then move on to the next goal, right? We say, okay, that feels good. Now I've gotten used to it feeling good. Now what? What's next, right?
Right.
And so what we actually want is we want to pay attention to the small wins along the way that get us to that goal, right? We want to gain a lot of satisfaction from those small wins. And those small wins are the process, right? It's the day in, it's the day out. It's, I have a laundry list, probably about 10 to 12 different things that I try to do on the daily. I wake up, I knock out 5 or 6 of them before I even leave the house. Those are my small wins, right? Now, how do those things add up? Well, in my case of, say, like writing books, that means 500 words every morning, right? And if that's not difficult enough, then it's 600 or 750 words every morning, whatever it might be, okay? And it's enjoying that process of getting up and being committed to something that is purposeful, that I'm choosing to do, that gives me a sense of competency. And what we hope is that the process will then eventually compound and snowball into those big results that your clients want, right?
Yeah.
The problem, of course, like especially in your line of work is, what are those small wins? Well, sometimes those small wins are like walking a mile.
That's it.
Sometimes those small wins are walking a lap, right? Like doing a couple push-ups on your knees, right? And it's human nature that it's sort of an expectancy theory of motivation, that we will be motivated to do certain things when we expect outcomes. But the problem with health and fitness, one, is that a lot of it's internal and you can't see it, right? And the stuff that's external, a lot of times takes a hell of a long time. And because every body's a little different, not every single element is totally in our control, right?
Right.
So that's really difficult from a motivational standpoint, because you've got people basically saying, well, I expect these outcomes, but over the course of time, I'm not seeing them. And if they're focused on the absence of that long-term outcome instead of the presence of the small wins, well, they're going to lose motivation, right? That's their why. Why? Because I want to look like this, feel like that, be able to do those things instead of, stopping and thinking like, oh, this step-by-step, day by day, small win approach, growth mindset will get you there.
That compound effect.
And it's fun. And I enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. You find the fun in that as well. And I learned that. That was one of the things that I think I understood. I didn't understand it to the degree of how you explained it to me, because again, as an athlete, we are always going to be the best, I want this, I want to win, right? And we're always expecting that sort of overall satisfaction result. But when it's not there, you can either be devastated and be destroyed by it, or like you say, you can shift your focus on small wins that will then compound, which will give me that consistency, that will give me then that confidence of knowing I can do that. I am achieving, I'm winning, and then eventually I can get to the overall goal.
And ultimately, here's where we come back to intrinsic and extrinsic, right? Is if you're intrinsically motivated, if there are certain things that you enjoy doing for their own sake, then you don't necessarily need that big outcome or that big goal, right?
Okay.
You're doing them for their own sake. The extrinsic, and it's okay to have some extrinsic motivators, right? Those are healthy. They can be healthy too, and we need those in some cases. But I think
at times, would you say it's okay to have those, even especially at the beginning of it, if that will help you get there?
Beginning, middle, or end. I don't think it necessarily matters. I think you want to be very careful about relying on extrinsic motivators, because then you got to always find new extrinsic motivators and constantly be switching them up. And essentially what we turn into in those situations is a dog chasing its tail, right? We never quite get there because we always need a new extrinsic motivator. Why? Extrinsic motivator is money, right? Okay, go, I get that raise, I make that salary, cool, hedonic adaptation. Get used to it, need a new motivator, right?
I want more.
Yeah. And it tends to be, like there's various lines of research that show, that extrinsic motivators, they're great for large quantities of low cognitive tasks. Okay. So, you want a client to do 50 push-ups, whatever it might be. Hey, you do 50 push-ups, you get this drink of water at the end, something like that, right? Yeah. Okay, so a push-up doesn't necessarily require, depends on the person, a ton of cognition, right? It's basically doing the same sort of like routine task over and over again. Yeah. You want somebody to, do something like write an essay, write a book, write a song, something along those lines. Well, like that's pretty tough to do. And they're not necessarily going to say like, okay, I'm only going to do that, if you pay me such and such. A lot of people are going to do that because they enjoy the process of building that,
developing
that. They have to want to come back to it, right? Which is where we get some of those overlaps with passion.
Dude, well, this insight, absolutely awesome. And we're going to need to do a part 2 on this, man. It's just so powerful with what you're bringing in and what you're sharing with us. And I think there's a lot of people out there that will definitely benefit from this. And as it was beneficial for me, and even as a coach and as an athlete, I mean, I've taken away so much that I've been able to implement. And I think the key is, would you agree in terms of the strategy with this, is like take in all this information and then find a way on how you can at least take one thing and implement it, and take one thing and put it to work. Because I think there's so much information, right, that we can obtain, but then if we don't take action, like what then happens with that information? It gets lost and we forget about it. So closing thought for today's episode, we're going to do a part 2 of this, right, brother?
Yep. I'm happy to come back. We'll do a part 2. Awesome. And I think, the closing thought, which you just sort of tapped into there, is, like peak performance, really becoming our best self is really the accumulation of baby steps.
There you go.
Like done consistently, time after time. Like, I'm telling my clients, I'm telling my students all the time, is like these things feel micro, but when you add them all up together, you really get the snowball effect, the sort of like compound interest. And that's where you really start to see the big changes. Of course, as we just talked about, the gap between that is trust, right? Yeah. Trust that the baby steps will actually have sort of like a significant impact. But, you know, that's something we can talk a little bit more about next time. So
how can people follow you, Nick? I know you're on social media. How can people connect with you with any more information about this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for the most part, I stay somewhat active on Instagram. My handle's at Dr. Nick Holton, Dr. _ Nick Holton, NICKHOLTON.
Repeat that one more time.
Yep, at Dr. Nick Holton, HOLTON. They can email me. My business name is eudaimonics, speaks to a particular type of happiness called eudaimonia. It's Nick, NICK, at EUDAIMONICS.org. Website, same thing, www.eudaimonics.org. And I assume, you know, you can put these in the show notes and things like that.
Yeah.
And then Twitter handle is the same thing. It's at Dr. Nick Holton.
Thanks for your time, Nick. It's always awesome, dude. Always gain so much wisdom, so much nuggets, dude. Thanks for your time. And we'll see you on the next episode, part 2, brother.
Thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Listen.